Hello and welcome everybody with this at this new episode of the podcast Time to Talk. My name is Jacob de Jonge and I'm very happy to talk today to Pascal Lottaz. Pascal is a professor at Kyoto University, International Relations, and is also the host of a very great YouTube channel, Neutrality Studies, which is also a website and a resource on everything to do with geopolitical neutrality. This channel, we talk with people who each in their own way is aiming for a peaceful world and is working towards that, each in their own way. And it is super urgent that we talk about this, about peace. Of course, everyone knows and has been following what's happening in Israel and Palestine. And so I would like to dedicate this program really to that issue, even though there's a lot more to talk about. So Pascal, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's start a little bit with the background of what's going on, or maybe first start with what was your feeling last Saturday and the weekend the Saturday before, and what happened shortly after. How are you looking? How do you read the news at this moment?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Jakob, for the invitation. It's great to be on your show. And, I said that to you in our private email correspondence. I'm not a Middle East expert. I have never lived there. I haven't studied the region in detail, but I will be happy to talk about what I perceive as one of the most tragic conflicts that has been going on for the last 75 years, ever since 1948, when a large part of Palestinians was ethnically cleansed from their homeland, and then you started having a state of Israel in a place where we had a territory of the Palestinians, and the Israelis. Don't get me wrong, the Israelis deserve a place. Israel needs to have a space. There needs to be place for people, right? The tragedy that befell the Jews in the Second World War with the Holocaust, between 4 to 6 million people who died, was utterly horrible. And the longing for an own state is absolutely understandable. But what started in 1948 is that one group of people asserted their dominance over a territory that was not empty, that already had people inside it, and that was the beginning of 75 years of suffering on both sides. And what went through my head Saturday, a week and a half ago, or almost 2 weeks ago, when the large-scale attack by Hamas on Israel happened, was, oh my God, how horrible again. It's happening again. And the spiral of violence keeps turning and keeps killing and keeps slaughtering people. And the thing that got me very much worried and enraged is that just like with the Ukraine war, the media now seems to be portraying as everything that's happening now as originating on that Saturday, as Israel is now justified in shooting back and killing as many Palestinians as they like. And please, be it in Gaza or in the West Bank, because they were attacked on Saturday, on that fateful Saturday, and they were attacked in a horrible, horrible way. And you and I, as pacifists, we cannot and certainly will not ever condone any kind of such violence, right? But at the same time, what we are seeing now is that the spiral is turning even worse. And what went through my mind back then is like, whatever the number of Israelis is that will be killed in the end, whatever it is, Israel will kill 10 times, maybe 100 times more Palestinians, because that's what every single time what happens. I don't know why, but if you look at the numbers, it's utterly clear that Israel always strikes back disproportionately 1 or 2 orders of magnitude, 10 to 100 times more. That's what happened over the last well, 50, 60 years. Every single time you have one Israeli who dies, you have about 10 Palestinians who die or more. And this will be the same this time. And now we know that the death toll on the side of the Israelis was 1,400, which is already kind of a humongous number, right? But I am absolutely certain that the death toll on the Palestinians will be more than 10,000, because that's what has happened over the last decades, and it's an utter tragedy. And it will be, again, that then will be the justification for even more carnage again on the other side. So this spiral is not stopping. And right now, Israel seems to have the idea that we want to stop the spiral by ethnically cleanse the territory for good. And I'm really, really, really worried that this might be the end of Gaza. And if you look at what happened over the last 1.5 weeks, it really seems as if though maybe ethnic cleansing and maybe genocidal ethnic cleansing is on the agenda. The like this evacuation order that came to evacuate all the Palestinians into the south, and then still like bombarding the south anyhow. It's such a humongous crime that is happening in reaction to another humongous crime, and that way we never get out of the spiral of crimes. So something needs to happen to stop this. The violence and counter violence will not cease. And we are talking about 7 million Palestinians, right? And about 5 to 6 million Israelis, Jews in that territory. Um, this, you know,
Mm-hmm.
this is a conflict that is settled with people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the physical presence of people is the cause of that, or the unwillingness to live together, or
Mm-hmm.
the inability, and that
Mm-hmm.
needs solving. That's what went through my mind.
Yes. Thank you very much, Pascal. And I have to say, me too. I'm utterly shocked. And I think you gave the words to it. That also, I mean, I'm not only reading it, but it was my first thought as well. Of course, it was a terrible attack by Hamas. But you already know beforehand, because we've seen it so many times before, what's going to be the consequences for the civilians in Gaza and in the West Bank. Um, So, and you named the word genocide, genocidal ethnic cleansing, and I think it's exactly what we're seeing. So I agree fully with you, and I think we should not be afraid to say it that way, personally, because I'm going to ask you later about how media reacts on this. But what first I would like to ask is, this is you say this is a cycle of violence. How come? Can you give a little more explanation of why this does not stop? Because we've seen this so many times. You're right. It is the fifth time, I think, in 16 years that it has escalated to an extreme level of violence, especially targeting civilians. How come this cycle of violence is not being broken?
Because there's no political solution, right? We have never reached the moment when both sides were able to put their names on a piece of paper that would outline a common vision for the future. For 75 years, we haven't had that. And a solution could be the two-state solution, where both sides say, okay, you get a territory, and we accept each other as neighbors. A solution could be a one-state solution, where we have like one common state, call it Israel, call it Palestine, call it Pal-Israel, I don't know, Palrail, I don't know. Like, give it any kind of name.
Mm,
But where we have a constitution that then would make sure that both ethnicities are able to are recognizing each other and live with each other under equal rights, and so on and so forth. We don't have that. What we have is a territory, a geographical space controlled by one of the two sides, by the Israelis, in which the other ethnicity lives inside under that control, but outside of being covered by a state solution, right? And without having their own state, they are nominally given sovereignty. The Palestinians nominally have sovereignty, but they don't control their territories, right? The Israelis control their territories, and the Israeli make sure that that life is pretty bad for them, so that you can keep them in check. Because again, the Israelis are actually the minority. group in that geographical space that they control. And that control has been condoned and has been even fostered by the international community to a good extent, the United States, but also like Europe and so on. And it has been accepted that this is the status quo. And the violence keeps going back and forth because, well, the Israelis are not willing to change the status quo, and the Palestinians are suffering under the status quo. So what the Palestinians do is they try to fight back. And let's be clear here. I mean, under the United Nations and so on, Palestinians have a right to defend themselves, just as the Israelis have a right to defend themselves against attack. Right? Everybody has a right to defend themselves. I mean, on a human level, if you get attacked, you have a right to defend yourself. Now, the thing is, both sides deploy that logic in order to justify the violence against the other. Right? Whereas I must say, one of the two sides is disproportionately stronger than the other, disproportionately inflicts more violence on the other. The Israelis disproportionately 10 times more, or more than 10 times, inflict more harm and more violence on the other side. And that's just the dying. That doesn't even include the apartheid state under which the Palestinians had to live and the daily injustices and so on that they had to suffer from. And now the thing that then happens is that you don't get a moment when you come to a political solution. We had that moment almost in 1993 with the Oslo process, but that thing, and by now it looks like a fata morgana, or like just a lie that was given in order to keep the situation as it is. And the Palestinians, they can't live like this. I mean, this is not a way to exist. So what happened 2 weeks ago on Saturday with the Hamas attack on Israel is horrible. It's just horrible on a human level. But I want to ask, what can the Palestinians do? And I'm not saying they should have done what they did. I mean, the Hamas should not have done that. But a serious question: what can Palestine do to change the course of its fate, which is to be a second class or third class citizen, in not even a citizen, like to be a occupied people and being completely under the thumb of an occupying force? What can Palestine do? Whenever they protest peacefully, they already get shot. 3 years ago, 2018-19, tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people protesting in Gaza on their side of the border, their side of the fence. They protest peacefully, and 200 people were shot, and more than 1,000 were maimed and wounded and disfigured for life. That was the peaceful protest. That's what happened to them when they protest peacefully. It's like, what are they supposed to do? And in connection with that, my honest question, real question, to anyone who disagrees with the idea that the Palestinians have a right to actually defend themselves, is like, how would Israel act if it was on the other side? If it was the Palestinians who control the territory, and it was the Israelis, it was the Jews who were in ghettos in Gaza and in the West Bank. If we just flip it upside down, what would the Jews do? And what would the Jews be allowed to do? What would the Israelis be allowed to do? What would we accept for them to do? It's like, seriously, like, how do we get out of this? And in order to get out of this, the only way is to think yourself into the shoes of these other people, and then figure out what you would want for yourself, and then apply that to the others, and then try to find a common ground. And there's certain things that are outside the possible, right? We do not want Israel eradicated from the face of the earth, and we do not want Palestine eradicated from the face of the earth. We want these people to have homes, preferably together, because, for Christ's sake, it's really nice when you have a good time together. It's really nice when you can visit each other at home and have food together. But in order to get to that point, we need to make sure that these wounds can heal, and the wounds right now are being just made worse and worse and worse.
You said very many interesting things, and one of them, of course, is the right to self-defense, because that's one of the main sort of lines in at least in Dutch media at the moment. Even after the horrible attack on the hospital, and I mean, yesterday a Christian church was bombed, one of the oldest churches in the world in Gaza. Was where Palestinians families took shelter against the bombings. The church was bombed, So it's so curious and so strange. How do you the fact that that we are the West, we the collective we are shouting self-defense when Israel commits their atrocities, because in my words that's what it is. Um, and we never mention the so-called right of Palestinians to defend themselves. How come that we are so one-sided in this issue in the West?
Is we are blind. The West is blind. We are utterly blind to our own crimes and to the crimes that of the people that we define as our own. I mean, the West identifies with Israel. The Israelis are us. We are Israel. In the minds and the eyes of a lot, not all. I must say, like in the last week, I have realized that even in mainstream media, I mean, the Palestinian question is not as one-sided as I was afraid it would be, but it is quite one-sided. But still, like um, what Israel is doing to Palestine is exactly what we Europeans have been doing through three continents: the North American continent, the South American continent, and Australia. We went there, we killed the locals, and we replaced them with our own. And then I mean, look at North America today. I mean, I don't compare Palestine anymore with South Africa or Israel with South Africa. It has gone way beyond. It's now comparable to North America. And the genocide, the Europeans have committed on the native North Americans, and even the way in which it is done and the way in which it is portrayed. Do you remember, like, these old movies, these old Western cowboy movies, when the evil Indians would come down and shoot at the poor settlers, right, that were in a little ring, and then the lady, she was screaming, the blonde girl, and then suddenly the cavalry comes in and shoots the Indians and rescues the settlers, right? This is exactly what's happening right now. This is the Palestinians are the Indians, and the Israelis and with their American weapons are now shooting at them in order to defend the settlers. This is precisely what is the case,
Hmm.
and unless something changes, it's going to end in the same way. The depopulation of the entire of entire Palestine. And I know it's utterly clear from what we have seen over the last not just couple of weeks, but the last decades, that some Israelis would like to have that. Just the way that some Palestinians are dreaming of a world in which they can expel all of the Jewish population from the area and regain their ground, right? And they are chanting death to the Israelis, and the Israelis chant death to the Palestinians. They actually do the same thing, just one side has way more power than the other one. Um, and the but I'm at the point where I don't compare this anymore with South Africa, because it has surpassed, the situation has surpassed South
Hmm.
Africa.
I find it also very strong that you say, and that is something that for me utterly lacks in Western politicians and a large part of the media. That's the way, like, we can sort of identify with what we choose to identify with one side and not with the other. And sort of this it's a basic fact that you also, I mean, can teach children at school, try to imagine yourself in the shoes of the other, how simple, how difficult can it be? But yet it seems extremely difficult. And it made me think, like, some people are making also, and you ask, what would you do in a situation of a Palestinian, or of Gaza? Gaza has been locked off from the world, like, for 16 years, has been a blockade, economic blockade for 16 years. And it's now a total blockade: water, electricity, food, medical supplies, everything is blocked, and they're being bombed. Like, many people are making comparisons now with what actually happened to the Jewish people in Europe, like the
Yeah,
ghetto of Warsaw. It was
yeah.
exactly what happened. Like, first of all, they were blocked from the outside world, and then the killing started. Like, there's so many parallels, but we don't seem to dare to put ourselves in the shoes of the ones who are suffering most at this moment. And so it just made me think of it. Um, you already mentioned in the beginning somewhere, that some of the reaction of the media and politicians looks like what's happening in the media around the war in Ukraine. What parallels do you see between the reporting around the war in Ukraine and the war in and the violence in Israel Palestine?
On the one hand, I see very strong parallels that certain quarters of the Western media try to make this good against evil. And the parallel between, okay, unprovoked attack. We had that adjective again, right? Unprovoked, the unprovoked attack, as if those 16 years of imprisonment was not a provocation. That's apparently that's just a matter of fact. It's just anything that any one of us should be able to live with, being 16 years in a prison, and that's not a provocation, and we without trial and anything, right? That on the one hand, that's that. On the other hand, there is more actually, and I'm happy for that. And there is a bit more of reporting about, well, the Palestinians have had it like pretty difficult, and this conflict is quite complex. We are getting just back at the violent into a violent state now. We've had violent states before. We have to now. We didn't have that with Ukraine. With Ukraine, the black and white was absolute, and it was unquestionable. Who's the baddie, and it's clear that Putin is Hitler, right? In this case, actually, the crime that has been underway and has been committed against the Palestinians is so egregious, is so huge, is so humongous, and so long lasting that even Western media is not able to completely, utterly shut that discussion out. So there is more of a debate of what's happening, but it is pretty clear also by the way that Western governments are acting in Germany and France. Any pro-Palestinian rallies and pronunciations are now forbidden, right? You cannot go to the street. We've had people in Germany being arrested. We've had a Jewish woman in her 60s or early 70s arrested in Germany for being pro-Palestinian and saying like Palestinians have a right to live, and she was arrested. It's really radical the way
It's
that.
it's a Jew like the groups. I don't know the exact names, but you have Jewish groups for
Yeah,
Palestine or Jewish groups for
yeah,
justice in
yeah,
the US, and they're now you see now the rift within the Jewish community also because you have this Anti-Defamation League who
yeah.
has now branded these Jewish groups anti-Semitic.
Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. Just the way that you have in the Labour Party in the UK, a large part of people who were thrown out of the Labour Party for anti-Semitism were Jews. So of course you have Jews in Jerusalem, in Israel, you have Jews in Europe, you have Jews in America who utterly understand how horrible the plight of the Palestinians is and who sympathize with them and who understand that this is a cycle of violence, right? The thing that we are talking about. You have
But
a lot of people who understand that, and these people, let's call them doves. The doves. Sorry, there's a new
what's a
feature.
nice name?
It's a new feature of my. I have to give this ended off. Sorry, the doves are now being attacked by the hawks in their own center. This is a typical thing that happens during conflicts when you have two sides that go to war with each other. You usually have some more dovish groups that want to work towards reconciliation, and you have more hawkish groups that want to solve the problem through force, through war. And what happens, typical, is that the doves try to cooperate, and the hawks then try to eradicate their own doves because the doves stand in the way of even more force, of more killing of the other one. And in that way, the hawks actually agree with each other that what we need is pure violence. I'm sorry, this is my Mac thingy. Wait here, reactions off. Sorry. So this is a typical it's a typical part of a conflict constellation, and
Mhm.
that's what's happening now to dovish Israelis, that they're being accused of anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism has nothing to do anymore with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism these days is a catch-all phrase to make people who are not online with the hawks, the Israeli
Mm.
hawks, to shut them up or to
Yeah,
physically eradicate them from the discussion.
I see some parallels with branding everyone pro-peace in Ukraine as
Yeah,
pro-Putin.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if you're pro-peace in Palestine and pro-Palestinian rights to give them equal rights, you are an anti-Semite.
It's
It's
it is
scary, I
our
think.
it is our hawks at home who fight against us because they have a
Mm.
different vision for how this conflict should be politically solved. And by politically, I mean politics by other means, which is war, right? And they
Yes,
want that. So therefore, they have to fight us, because if we win the game
the
inside our
arguments.
communities, the argument, then our states will not use that lethal, deadly force that they're doing, and that these hawks won. So we are being fought against by our own people who want a violent resolution. Because the one thing to understand is sometimes in German and so on, we say that violence is not a solution. That's like, one of these common sayings. And the thing is, it's wrong. Violence is a solution. That's why people do it. That's why people want violence as a solution. And we see that on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, both sides who want violence to be the solution to the conflict. And we see in Ukraine people who want violence to be the solution of the conflict, those who suppress the political solutions. And this is the tragedy of 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 war dynamics. Yeah.
I was wondering, I asked this also in our previous discussion about Ukraine, but how's you travel between Switzerland and Japan? How is the attitude of Japanese media, for instance, to this conflict, or Swiss media? I was just wondering.
So Swiss media is way more online with the typical Western narrative, especially when it comes to Ukraine of evil Putin and saintly Zelensky and evil Russia and good Ukraine. Japan too, to a certain extent, but the emotions don't boil as hotly as in Europe. It's the conflict is reported over here in a bit more of a factual way, with a bit more of historical background, because people over here actually wonder, hey, how come that this conflict happened? And Japanese media is more prone to go back and actually do research and say, like, okay, we have a long history, and they actually show that. Not every single time, but more than in Europe. Yeah, and with Palestine, to be honest, I haven't looked at the Japanese media very much recently. But also with that one, people know that the Middle East is a powder keg, and there's less moralism. Although the knee-jerk reaction is also here to say that Israel is now reacting to what happened 2 weeks ago, which is the standard narrative, right? Israel isn't committing a crime. Israel is just, has to
Self-defense.
react, is being pushed into reacting. It's very sad. But then the Palestinian action, the Palestinians killing of 1,400 Israelis, is not framed as such. So one side is framed as the aggressor, the other one as the defender. Like that's what the spiel that we're seeing going on, when in fact it's a goddamn circle.
Yeah, of course. Hey, if we talk about the region, because of course, even if you would go along with the right of self-defense, etc. I personally doubt very much whether, like in Ukraine, like in Ukraine, you say, of course, there's an aggressor. If you put that frame, there's an aggressor, so we have to fight back with violence. What we now see in Ukraine, that the choice of violence rather than diplomacy is in the end going to destroy Ukraine. I think
Yes,
you would agree with that.
absolutely.
Now it seems, and you've said that also, that Israel is the strong party. They're relative to the Palestinians, they're strong. But I'm afraid, like even for those who claim to protect the rights and the security of Israelis, if they're not in the end also endangering, especially Israelis. Of course, first Palestinians, but then also Israelis, because if you see what's boiling in the region, if you see the mass protests all around the world, and predominantly in Europe and America and in Middle East, what if? How do you see? I mean, if there's a real escalation, there's a real trouble for all Israelis.
Yeah.
So, um, how much of a risk do you see there if you look to Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, maybe Jordan if they do not keep their government in place, etc.
It's a huge risk. It's a huge risk, and just as with Ukraine, you have actors who are interested in making this bigger, and it's usually the smaller ones, right? I mean, the only way to come to a solution without violence is by stopping the violence now, right? And sit down, and actually for Israel to accept that it has to negotiate the release of its 200 prisoners in exchange for a a a boiling a stifling of the conflict, right? If you keep if you keep using physical violence in order to solve your problem, you only make the danger of this becoming bigger and actually, you know, the conflict spreading worse. And the only thing that can outdo the disproportionate force that Israel has compared to the Palestinians is a Arab front against Israel, right? If we have a new war where, like, let's say, I mean, it's unlikely to happen, but if Egypt, Iran, as you said, Jordan and Lebanon all attacked Israel, they could inflict very, very grave harm on Israel. They could kill tens or hundreds of thousands of Israelis, and the Israelis and the Americans would kill tens, hundreds, or millions of Arabs, right, in these states. And that's the way that the conflict then would grow. But that actually is the only way that the Palestinians have a military chance to win, in the sense that they were thinking about winning, of like expelling the Jews, right? You can only expel the Jews by having a complete military victory, which is utterly unlikely. Anything else, if, like, let's say this spreading doesn't happen and the complete domination of the Israelis doesn't happen, the Israelis are not able to kind of ethnically cleanse the entirety of Gaza, kill, I don't know, 500,000 Palestinians, and the other 1.5 they are expelled to Egypt, something like that, right? If that doesn't happen, what you have is that the Israelis will go into Gaza and the Palestinians will be able to use the advantage. I mean, Hamas will be able to use the advantage that they have on the ground and kill many more Israelis than the Israelis kill them, and thereby you then have another horrible bloodbath that will end in a stalemate, just as Ukraine is a stalemate right now, right? In a bloodbath stalemate, and that's what we might get in Palestine if something doesn't change dramatically in the approach towards the conflict resolution mechanism.
Like, if we're talking about Ukraine, I think this is a clear trigger point for a potential direct confrontation between nuclear superpowers. Is this conflict, do you see this as another trigger point of a different but similar scale kind of war, or how do you see it?
No, because the only superpower involved is the United States. Russia doesn't have the back of the Palestinians. Palestine Hamas is not a proxy of Russia, nor a proxy of China. The only superpower involved is the US, and the only
what about Iran?
Iran is not a superpower. Iran is
Okay,
a big conventional military power, but it doesn't even have a nuclear bomb. There's only two parties that have nuclear bombs in this conflict: the US and Israel. Israel has a nuclear bomb, and that's very dangerous.
But do you think that Russia and China will keep themselves outside of this if this escalates into an all-out Middle East war?
Yes.
You think they will keep out?
Yes, I don't see any reason why Russia would. I mean, maybe they would probably intervene on a small level. They did, but let me put it this way: if we talk about nuclear escalation, which I think we did, I mean, because in the Ukraine instance, we have the actual danger of a nuclear escalation on both sides, right? Russia versus the United States, which might end in complete mutually assured destruction. Might end. I don't think that we have that dynamic in the Middle East, because I don't think Moscow or Beijing would be willing to seriously risk being nuclearly annihilated by the United States in order to save Tehran or anything. I don't think they would intervene. They would try to send to somehow help the way that they helped Syria, or try to intervene with Syria, but that's on the sub-nuclear level. So I don't think we are talking about a mad scenario, the way that the danger was there in Europe.
Contained regionally.
Yeah. But containment would still mean millions of deaths, millions of people dying. At the moment, we are at the level of tens of thousands with where the war is now between Palestine and Israel. We are in the realm of tens of thousands, because I'm pretty sure the Palestinian death toll will be in the tens of thousands if it remains low, because that's as horrible as it is at the moment. But if this thing grows, then we will be in the realm of millions of people, if not tens of millions. And that's without it going nuclear.
Yes. So still a scenario that you should absolutely go against and try to
It is horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah. So, but maybe I was wondering, and I've been wondering this also since the war in Ukraine. As you see now, sort of the power shift from the west to the east. Not that the power of the US is disappearing; it will still be powerful, I think, for a long time. But you see a power shift. People have been talking about um, what's the word? You know, the equal sharing of power between the big
Multipolarity.
yes, the multipolar moment, let's say, is approaching. How would this affect the does this current war, have anything to do with that? Is my question. And how will it affect sort of the outcome if it's not an all out war, let's say?
It does. It definitely has an effect. The United States is not able anymore to project the kind of unhinged power that it was able to project in the 1990s, where nobody could match it, and where it was out of the question that uh, that the outcome of a hot shooting war would not, at least to a good part, be the way that the United States imagines it. I mean, just think of the Gulf War, right, in the early 90s, and also the Iraq War. Which wasn't really a war, it was more of a slaughter, right? It was a predetermined kind of outcome. And this war is not predetermined. We don't know how it will go. It is a lot of things are in jeopardy, and for on all sides. And the actions and the decisions of the smaller regional players carry much more weight than what it did in the 1990s, right? And even in the early 2000s. So the decisions of Netanyahu, the decisions of the Palestinians, and the decisions of even of Jordan, of Lebanon, of Hezbollah. Just think of Hezbollah. Their decisions are having much greater weight in the potential unfolding of the scenario that we're seeing. That's why we don't know what's happening there. With Iraq, both Iraq wars were pretty clear what's going to happen unless the United States changes its mind, which it actually did toward the end of the first Iraq war. It kind of it didn't get rid of Saddam because it decided not to get rid of Saddam, but that was a U.S. decision, right? That period is over. So the multipolarity and the doesn't only mean we have a multipolarity between Russia, U.S., China, and China. It also means that the regional actors are more multipolar, and that the projection capability of the U.S. Is diminishing actually at the moment.
But this must also be considered in Israeli governing circles, no? Because of course, for Zionist people, Israel has a goal in itself as a sort of promised land, etc. But from the US perspective, Israel is sort of a power base to control the Middle East, no? So
Yes, it is.
so that's why I was wondering, like, of course, this is speculation, but it seems to me a bit like these actions, sort of a final push to ethnically cleanse Israel at this moment from Palestinians. Uh, does it not, is it not sort of this urge to do this? Is it not with a perspective, US is going to lose power now, so this is maybe our last chance to use the military might of the US to fulfill this project.
I think so. Yes, I think that's correct. I'm pretty sure this is what a couple of people in the government of Israel are thinking about. This is our chance. The hawks of the Palestinians gave us, the hawks of Israel, exactly what we wanted, which is an excuse to finally get rid of that goddamn Gaza thing, and kill as many as we can, and make sure the others leave to Egypt. I'm pretty sure there's a good number of people who think like that. I'm pretty sure that a good number of American great strategic thinkers of the neocons actually think like that too. And it's like, okay, we now need to create that very muscular proxy state in the Middle East that then will help us to keep Iran in check, because, well, the America kind of dismantled themselves Iraq, which was kind of the counterbalance to Iran. So yeah, you build up Israel, which is the only state that you can control 100%, right? The others, like Egypt and so on, are allies, but you know that they can switch and they might switch.
Yes.
They already did it once, almost, when they elected Morsi, and then luckily Morsi was wiped away and replaced by a dictator that is more in line with the US. But even that dictator
Israel was
can
very
only go
happy with
so and so
Sisi.
far. Yeah, and you can see right now. I mean, even Egypt is not willing to go along with like just opening the borders and taking in 1.5 or 2 million Palestinians that will never ever return to their lands. I mean, the Israelis will never ever open that border again. This is utterly clear. There's no question about that. And the whole idea now, also that's the other thing, that how you can see the spin in the media in the West is like, oh, the United States is trying so hard together with Israel to get civilian goods, humanitarian goods into Gaza and convince Egypt to be a good citizen and let this in. It's like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Just United States, just make Israel stop bombing Gaza. That is the
But
biggest. That's the biggest humanitarian aid you can do. But the whole narrative is like we have to convince Egypt to help. It's like, it's just crazy. It's absolutely utterly crazy.
it's as morally totally warped. And it's even today. I think today, this morning, I think Guterres, like the chief of the
Yeah.
UN, he said the same thing. Oh, the people are suffering. We need humanitarian aid without even mentioning Israel. Stop bombing. And
That,
this is like if the UN, the UN should take a
yeah.
lead in this. If the other states doesn't do it,
I mean, the
it's
thing
just
is,
truly shocking.
you're right. I mean, the UN should take a lead. The thing is, the UN has had its fingers in this entire catastrophe from the beginning, right? It was the UN that gave like so much land to the
True.
to the Israelis in the first place. And I'm not saying that the UN is actually trying, or the way the UN is involved is actually to a large extent also a positive actor for the Palestinians. There is
Mhm.
special rapporteurs and so on, and it has
And
been on
their
the
offices are
highest
being
level.
bombed by Israel.
Their offices are being bombed by Israel. Exactly. I mean, this is how horrible it is. That is why it is an ethnic cleansing, why it is genocidal. And that's why it is so utterly obvious to you and I, and to a lot of people who are not completely captured by the Western narrative, especially in Africa, South America, in Asia as well, that, this is a very large um, injustice that's being done on the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are leashing out at the Israelis, which then leash out back at them. I mean, this is clear to a lot of people, but the Western neocons and colonial-minded Europeans, they don't understand that. What they understand is that we have a white settler Europeans that now need to defeat evil, savage brown people. They really go back. They fall back into that thinking. Um, like even some of the people who would say like, no, you cannot use the word Indian anymore to describe Native Americans. That is racist. Even those people default back into those categories, and I'm sorry to say that. That's just how dumb we are. That's how dumb and how stupid Europeans are. We are,
So
because we don't realize that we are still a colonial. We are still colonizers in a colonial
so
mindset, still in 2023.
so as a last question, Pascal,
Mm,
because I know we have to round this off.
mm.
Um, what if at this moment European leaders suddenly discovered that we are quite stupid and we didn't understand this thing and we totally miscalculated, Let's say in a hypothetical situation that they would suddenly realize that they have always followed the wrong policies until now, and you are called in as an advisor what to do now. What would you say to them, to the European leaders like von der Leyen and Borrell and all the statesmen, Macron and Scholz? What would you say? What should we do at this moment?
Immediately call for a ceasefire. Immediately call for the cessation of all hostilities from the Israeli side. Israel, self-defense is shooting down the rockets that come from Gaza, shooting down the rockets that come, I don't know, the West Bank doesn't shoot at them, but incoming rockets, shoot them down, but you don't go and bomb. And you, Hamas, for God's sake, or for Allah's sake, stop this as well. And we meet again, and we meet in on neutral ground. We meet somewhere. Maybe we meet in Moscow. Maybe we meet in Paris. I don't care. But we are now actually going to try to break the cycle of violence, and this time we do it for real, and we actually ask for forgiveness. We ask for forgiveness from the Palestinians, and we try to get the Palestinians to ask for forgiveness from the Israelis, because both sides do violence to each other. One side much more than the other. One side much more than the other. But we need to refocus the discussion on the suffering, on the human suffering of both sides. It doesn't help to only focus on your own suffering, which you then use as an excuse to kill the others. We need to focus on the suffering of the other one. We need to get the Israelis to focus on the hurt of the Palestinians, and we need to get the Palestinians to focus on the hurt of the Israelis, and we need to get to the point where we can have enough doves in both camps to agree that we need a moment like in Ireland, where the Irish forgive the British, the English, for colonizing them for hundreds of years, and just say like, okay, enough is enough. You take that North Irish thing, whatever, and we do not kill you anymore. We stop this. You give us our independence, and we do our own thing, and we work out a solution. Or like what happened between France and Germany after the Second World War. We have examples of successful reconciliation when it happened, when you find a larger structure under which you can then unite former enemies. We need to unite these enemies. And my thing is, at the moment, you need to stop the killing. If we don't stop the killing will just perpetuate itself, and it will not end well. And the situation, as we said, is very uncertain. This might well end very poorly for Israel as well. It might go super awesome and they can cleanse the whole territory, for them, maybe, but it might go the other way around. It might also, if this becomes bigger, it might kill hundreds of thousands or millions of Jews. And it might just perpetuate this into the next 50 years of killing each other. So I would call for immediate ceasefire, immediately.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pascal, for this interview. I think it was super clarifying and super urgent and necessary to say these things. So thanks a lot for talking to me again today, and hopefully we'll stay in touch and we'll continue these kind of discussions.
Thank you for your work, Jakob. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you too. Yeah.